What's up, fam? Extraordinary Life with Elijah, and I'm telling you, you probably are gonna wanna hold on to your hair for this one. Might get a little offensive, but this week, Kailani, Azriela, Sharla are my extra, and I am the ordinary. Girlies, all three of you, I'm so grateful that you are in my life, that as we get to live life together out of the overflow of the grace that God has given you to please his heart, as you faithfully exercise those things before him, you impart so much grace to me to know him more, and I bless you all in Jesus' name. Fam, here recently in my faith family, we've been going through this series called Battle Ready. We've been pressing into the spiritual armor of God and how it empowers us to take our stand against the ways of darkness. Now, in conjunction with this, the teaching has just been fantastic. My family and I have been going through this process of discipleship in the ordinary of life and looking for extra insights within it in regards to exterminating prairie dogs. My house that I have is slab on grade, and so prairie dogs present a very real risk to my property value. If they create a colony underneath of my house and they undermine the substrate of my house, it can cause instability in my floor, cause cracking, and it's just a mess. Now, if I lived out in the country, I would have shot these things a long time ago, but since I live in the city, they kind of frown on firing weapons inside city limits, so bought a live trap. Now, I saw an opportunity to teach my daughters about the wiles of darkness. The verse that I was leaning into with them, it says that we're not unaware of the schemes of Satan so that he might not outwit us. That I led them into that, to say, I want you to watch this process with me as I trap these prairie dogs to learn about Satan and his schemes, and very quickly realized that in this exercise I was in the role of Satan. It was so instructive, my friends, and we got to a place that was, one, confronted and convicted me of sin and absolutely scared my pants off. Family, when I first got the live trap, we put it out and I got the bottoms of 2 solo cups, made these 2 little plates, little pans, put bird seed in those, set one in front of the hole, one inside of the live trap. Bada boom, bada beam. Prairie dog number 1 of 4 busts out of his holes like, man, these are delicious. Ran right into the trap, boom. Caught him, 1 of 4 down. And I reset the trap shortly after that. Same day, set it up in the same way. Bam, prairie dog number 2 runs into the live trap, 2 of 4 down. Bam, man, this is gonna be a super short process. Now, I started showing the girls about how darkness takes things that tempt us and puts it out in front of us to distract us from the danger that is surrounding. Because the bird seed is so tasty, it's so easy to get to. There's little peanuts in there, sesame seeds, sunflowers. The prairie dogs would just nom on that stuff, run into the live trap, and by the time that they realized that the trap closed, it was too late for them. Now, in that, God began to speak to the fact that in Galatians chapter 6, verse 1, it says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently, but watch yourselves, or you also may be tempted. And so darkness draws us out and distracts us in order to get us into traps, into snares, so he can destroy our lives. But if we're not careful, if we don't remain alert, that our enemy, the devil, is prowling to and fro, seeking whom he may devour. If we don't stay vigilant, he'll devour us. But then also, if we're not careful, as we attempt to help people who are being preyed on by darkness, we too ourselves can be tempted. So, prairie dog number 1, down by the roaring lion. Prairie dog number 2, down by trying to help his friend out and wound up getting sucked into the same destruction. He went down too. Now, the thing that I wasn't planning on is that prairie dogs are incredibly intelligent. So the 2 remaining ones saw that their friends disappeared and that it was connected to this strange silver boxy thing. And for a time, I couldn't even get the prairie dogs to come out of their hole and even look at the little seed pans. Very often I'd put the seed in there, it would last a day or 2. They weren't eating it at all, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to get even more tricksy with these guys. Pulled the live trap and put out the seed pans, and every morning I would go out at the same time, fill up the little seed pans so that the prairie dogs would come out, eat the seed. It was at the same hole, same time every time, and they began to be desensitized to my presence and the fact that they weren't afraid of the seed pans anymore. Now, throughout this process, I not only was attracting the 3rd prairie dog, but I also started attracting other animals. Magpies started coming in and eating the seeds too. I don't like magpies, just so you know. Montana protects magpies as a songbird. It is not legal to kill them, but I do chase them off my property. I do not like them. Magpie starts coming in, eating the seed, and instructing the prairie dog in how to gain the benefits and pleasures of sin while staying outside of the dangers, being wise in how you engage sin. I put out the live trap after a time. Once the prairie dog would run out, eat the seed, I put the live trap by the seed with not set, the gate closed, so that again, could desensitize the prairie dog to the presence of the trap. Now, this 3rd prairie dog was incredibly intelligent, that he would come out, finally got desensitized to it, but would hit the side of the trap to knock seed out of the pan so that he could eat the seed and not go into the trap. Likewise, the magpie would reach into the trap, grab the little seed pan, pull it out with its beak, set it in the grass, and then eat the seed. Now, this was totally a Romans 1:32. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. It was so wild to see that the magpie would reach into the thing that would destroy you, pull out the seed pan, and then eat the seeds right in front of the prairie dog. He's sitting there looking out of his hole. That there's this discipleship in ways of saying like, yeah. These are harmful things and it'll destroy you. But see, look, I'm pulling the good things out. And man, this stuff is tasty. Man, are you a prude? Like, are you kidding me? This stuff is good, and I have freedom to eat this stuff. This is how you do it when we... Bam! Bad company corrupts good moral. Eventually, prairie dog number 3, desensitized by bad company, getting more and more brave, ventures out of his hole and walks into the trap and gets trapped. So disturbing, with the 4th prairie dog looking on. The 4th prairie dog literally was watching while his buddy got trapped in the snare. He popped right down the hole, but towards the very end there, he was just kind of hovering around, jumping down the hole, kind of coming out, jumping down the hole again, watching, seeing what his friend was doing, but he wasn't engaging it. Friends, I went out and I disposed of the 3rd prairie dog. And it was so disturbing in that as I was getting rid of the 3rd prairie dog, the 4th prairie dog was sitting in his hole watching the entire time. Having watched their behavior, I was pretty sure that I was then gonna have a dry spell. I wasn't gonna be able to get the 4th prairie dog right away. But when I went to refill the little solo cup trays, 2.5 feet away from me, the prairie dog was peeking out of its hole, watching me fill the trays with seed. I'd taken down my camera off the tripod. I thought that was it for the day. I went back inside and immediately the prairie dog comes out of his hole. Now, granted, he was a lot more skittish, and I apologize for the shaky footage. I had to just grab my camera back out of its case and started shooting handheld because it was so quick. He would run to the seed, kind of look around, back down the hole. He'd get halfway to the seed, run back down the hole. Then he finally made it to the seed, would eat just a little bit, but then immediately just bust back down the hole. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? Oh my word, I've seen so many people destroyed by this, and here I am, I'm doing it again. Oh, I'm doing it again. Oh my, what am I thinking? Down the hole, and then there's the refractory period. Oh, but man, that seed, it's really good. And then, so interestingly then, all of a sudden he stopped eating the seed. He popped up out of a hole on the other side of the fence and would just watch, and then popped up out of another hole that was over by the tree that's in the middle of our yard and was eating grass. Now, over this time period of this process of discipleship with my kids, become very good at reading the body language of prairie dogs. While the prairie dog was eating the grass, he was also really wanting the seed. He'd pop up, look at the seed, twitch his tail, kind of run towards it a little bit, and then run back. No, I'm gonna eat grass a little bit more. He ran up on our patio, was watching, and would run halfway across the yard and run back until finally he popped down a hole, popped back up the hole right by the seed, and then was completely then desensitized to the cage, that he's eating grass right outside the cage. Like, I'm gonna stand in the way of sinners. Like, I'm gonna prevent people from getting into things that are gonna harm them. I'm eating grass, but I'm just standing at the face, guarding against other people. Hey, what's that here in this cage? Wham! And he was caught too. Friends, it's so like darkness to continue to plant seeds in our minds, and that for a time that we're like, oh, I've seen so many people get destroyed by that, and I'm not gonna go back to it. I'm just gonna eat healthy. I'm gonna eat on things that are good. I'm just gonna feed myself on the word. I'm gonna pray. I'm doing good, and you're doing good for a time, but then all of a sudden you're like, man, I'm gonna just prevent people from going into that. And I can go into these structures and I'm just gonna get a little snack and bam, it's too late. Now friends, this is so incredibly like darkness. That, like I said, that this magpie was instructing the prairie dogs in how to reach into the dangerous structures and pull it out. That though they know that those who do such things are deserving of God's wrath, they not only continue to do such things, but approve of those who practice them. Mr. Magpie, that as soon as this fourth prairie dog was captured, that he just panicked. He's running in circles, like digging at the bottom of the cage, trying to dig himself out. That when I went and got the cage, that there were feces all over the bottom of the cage. That he literally messed himself when he was captured. That as he was trying to dig his way back out of the trap, that this magpie came flying in out of nowhere and had such this menacing, aggressive movements in its body and began to peck through the cage, to peck, not trying to get the seed, but literally pecking the prairie dog while it was still living, seeking to devour it. Family, it was at this point then that I had my very extreme extra in the middle of my very ordinary experience. The previous night, Charlotte had pressed in with me to confront areas in my life that I confessed and identified with areas of unforgiveness, bitterness, and resentment in my heart. That as she confronted me with those things, that she said, can you forgive, Elijah? Can you release? You realize that this is sin. Can you release it? That I told her while I was with her, that I said, yes, I know it is in the heart of God. I know this is his word. I know this is what I have to do. But wife, if I were to say in this moment, yes, I forgive, I would be doing it out of compulsion, that I know what I should be doing. But honey, I wouldn't forgive. There would be no forgiveness in my heart. I'm not there. But yeah, we need to do something about this. Family, as I began to think about making this video for you here and pulling all the lessons in together, that I went and looked up the passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 that I've been quoting to my girls for weeks. I went to read that actual passage, and that whole passage is about forgiveness. Family, as I saw the magpie come and begin to peck through the cage to seek to destroy the prairie dog, the reality of darkness and the world began to flood into my heart. Darkness goes into the things that would destroy us. It goes into the traps that would destroy and take our lives, and it sweetly and seductively draws us in, allures us and tempts us away, while even having voices outside to mock and to threaten. You prude, this is 2023. Are you seriously living by those standards and those morals? Like, you're not gonna go in there and enjoy it? Like, what kind of a stuck-up jerk are you? It tempts and it prods, but until the point at which we bite on the sin and are destroyed and fall, it's at that point that the very people who were inviting us into and saying, you do you, you live your life the way you want to, that are then the ones that jump on us to then seek to destroy us and to devour us in our place of weakness. Family, that it was in that space that God brought such conviction to my heart and said, Elijah, you are messing with things and you're dealing with things that are so much far beyond you, that you have gotten yourself into a situation, son, that you are not going to be able to dig your way out of. The only way forward, Elijah, is to repent your way out of this situation. Repentance and rest is your salvation. Family, it was then there that God gave me my final lesson. And he said, Elijah, you're going to let this prairie dog loose. And family, I battled so hard with listening to his voice that as I saw the principles and God was flooding my heart with spiritual insight and awareness of the forces and the schemes of darkness in my own life and how he's preying upon me and other people through the roots of my bitterness, he said, Elijah, you're going to let this prairie dog loose. Then I said, nope, I understand what you're saying, but I've set a precedent. The 3 before them were all exterminated. And this one, I'm not just gonna turn this prairie dog loose and let it be somebody else's problems. That's not what I do. And I come from a long line of family that if they find out that I turned it loose, that I didn't exterminate it, I'm gonna have to face their judgment. Like, what do you mean you turned it loose, man? You wuss, couldn't get the job done, huh? Oh, are you one of those? You one of those? No, that prairie dog messed up and it needed to face its consequences, Elijah. You turned it loose, you relocated it, huh? That family, there was this then generational thing that started cropping up in my heart that I started struggling with. I get what you're saying. I understand the principle, but I'm not gonna let it loose. And he said, yeah, you're gonna let it loose because Elijah, you are the prairie dog. I finally saw what God was doing. First in the physical, then in the spiritual. And as I picked up the cage, I said, yes, Father, I will obey you. But then he began to speak to my heart about his goodness. That as I carried this little prairie dog, he started to chirp, and as I carried this little prairie dog, that he started to chirp, to cry out, help, help. He didn't realize that I was taking him to a spacious place, that I put him in the back of my car and got a tie-down strap, and that I tied down his little cage that while I drove, that his cage wouldn't slide around and cause him to be hurt. That I started up my car and turned on the air conditioner so it would cool the inside of his car while I got ready to go so he wouldn't be in a hot car. And as I drove down the road, God began to speak to my heart about how he has ministered to my life, that I, of my own choices and allowing darkness to draw me away and to tempt me into destruction, living off of the pleasure and the power of bitterness and anger and hatred and rage and resentment, that I had gotten myself into a situation I couldn't dig my way out of, and that darkness was being given access to my life to destroy me, but that because of his goodness and because of the grace of my Father, that he was taking me and setting me in a spacious place, a place that I couldn't get to on my own. And as I contemplated these things, I adjusted my rearview mirror down so that I could watch the prairie dog, and that he, after time, stopped spinning around his cage and just laid down in the middle of his cage. He wasn't chirping anymore. That there was a sense of movement, that I'm going to a new place. And as I carried the prairie dog out to release him, that he wasn't chirping and jumping around anymore. And that when I set the cage down and I opened the lid, that for a time he just sat in the cage, and then all of a sudden said, "Oh, the door is open," and poof, ran out into the field, ran out across. And then I saw that he started then grabbing, pulled something up out of the field and was munching on it. And God said, "Elijah, I've set you free. Now don't return to your yoke of slavery." Family, if you find that you're in a situation where there are things that you can't resist, that you are not free to say no to them, no matter how hard you try, that maybe out of a place of just innocently merging forward and biting on things that tasted really good, and that you found yourself in a destructive place and were ensnared, or that maybe you saw a friend who was getting ensnared in something, and that your heart longed to help them, but in reaching out to help them and to restore them, that you yourself got pulled into a place where you were being tempted, or that you're in a space where you saw other people that are reaching into things that are destructive, that God has said no, and that his judgment is against those things. But you're like, well, they're pulling things out, like, I don't think it's that bad, and we're super spiritual, like we get each other. I approve of this, and that bam, that you're caught, that you're captured, and that maybe that you're in a space where you're like, I've been on this stuff for years and I don't want to do it, and I've seen my father destroyed by these things, and I saw his mother that was destroyed, my grandmother, and my great-grandfather was destroyed by these things. I've seen this pass from generation to generation and to generation, and now it's me, and I can't help but bite on this stuff. I can't resist it. And that you put up fences, you put up walls, that you skirt around it, you try to eat healthy, and that you stay in a place where you're safe for a while, but there's just this draw of like, oh, but I just want to, but I'm just going to get close to it, and I'm going to stand in the way of the interest to keep people from getting into, and then, oh, bam, you find yourself in this place and you're ensnared, and then all of a sudden, darkness is breaking in like crazy and attacking you, seeking to devour you, and the people that invited and lured you in and mocked you from the outside, that they, once you got over that threshold, now they're the ones that are the most vicious and attacking you and tearing you down. You're in that space and you don't feel like there's ever going to be any freedom for you. I declare over you, thanks be to God for Jesus Christ, my Lord. Who will save me from this body of death? The things that I want to do, I don't do. And the things that I do, I don't want to do the do that I do. Who's going to save me? There's no way out, friend. If you find yourself in that space, your only way forward is through repentance. To say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you, and you alone am no longer worthy to be called your son. I confess my sin before you. Please receive me back. And that we have a good, gracious, merciful Father who forgives, restores, and redeems through the gift of his Son, accepting our sin in exchange for his righteousness, that him who had no sin became sin so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. And that out of God's goodness, out of his grace, his glory, and his gentleness, that he picks us up and places us in a spacious place because he, out of his character, delights in us. If that's you personally, that you wrestle with things of sin that have you in bondage, I declare there is freedom and release for you in Jesus' name. And that if in your life as well, in seeing the people that are surrounding you, that you find this thing in your heart where it says, no, I ain't no weakling. I ain't gonna let people off the hook. Man, if they sin, man, there's consequences for that, and I'm holding them to that. And if they're destroyed, well, man, that's on them. They shouldn't have done that. If that's you, and that there's this pressure because of the community or the family that is surrounding you to say, like, I ain't no weakling. I'm gonna stick it to people, and friends, my confession to you is that God has saved me from that exact thing. And that out of the heart of Jesus, expressed through Paul, says, now instead, you ought to forgive and to comfort those, so that those who have been in sin will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, Elijah, to reaffirm your love for those who may have caused you grief. Another reason that I wrote this was so that you could see if you would stand the test and to be obedient in everything. Anyone that you forgive, I also forgive. And what I have forgiven, if there was anything to forgive, I have forgiven in the sight of Christ for your sake, in order that Satan might not outwit us, for we are not unaware of his schemes. If you subscribe to what I am doing, then hit the thumbs down button. Hit it and then get it. Obedience is better than sacrifice. And if you love this video, you didn't just like it, then hit the thumbs down button. I pray blessings on all of your days. I love you guys lots, and I will see you in the next video.